It was an up and down weekend for the University of Louisville athletics. The football team suffered a tough loss to Kentucky in the Governor's Cup on Saturday evening, but then it gets positive from here on out, talking about the men's basketball and volleyball teams. All that on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Netsuite, the #1 cloud financial system to power your growth. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Also want to take this time to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I alluded to in the opener, it was an up and down week for the University of Louisville athletics, beginning with the football team losing 52-21 at the hands of the Kentucky Wildcats in the Governor's Cup on Saturday evening. We'll talk about the initial takeaways from that contest, and then it gets positive from here on out, beginning with men's basketball. Looking a little rough after the first 4 games to start the season, but turned it around in a big way with a big week in the Bahamas over Thanksgiving week. 2 solid wins over Mississippi State and Maryland. We'll talk about each of those victories individually and what it means collectively for this team moving forward, heading into another tough week. And then we'll end out this show talking about the volleyball team. The bracket was released last night. To no one's surprise, the Louisville volleyball team, the #1 overall seed in the field. The tournament pairings were released. We'll talk about some of their opponents and how they handled adversity in the final week of the regular season. But before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinals Sports Zone, where I serve as both the football beat writer and a recruiting analyst, and also do some various announcing work for the university, certain sports. You can follow my Twitter handle in the graphic below, and then podcast Twitter is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into the show. Unfortunately, the Cardinals suffering defeat on Saturday evening in the season finale, 52-21 at the hands of the Kentucky Wildcats. But first, I want to take this time to extend my sincerest condolences to the Satterfield family. For those who are not aware, Coach Scott Satterfield's father passed away on Saturday before the game, and he was made aware about an hour before game time, according to Sports Information Director Rocco Gasparo. So we want to send our thoughts and prayers to Coach Sat and his family, during these tough times, and just extend our thoughts and prayers. But in terms of the matchup as a whole, started out somewhat promising. I know the Cards allowed Kentucky to score in 6 plays on the opening drive, but they answered with a very sustainable drive that ended with the Malik Cunningham touchdown. But it went all downhill after that. And I think that the main takeaway from this game is that this game got out of hand quickly, and Kentucky was just better in all aspects of this game. Speaking from, a chronological order in that first quarter, Kentucky goes down and scores. Then Louisville goes down and scores. And Kentucky goes down and scores again. Although Louisville made some adjustments in the rushing defense, still didn't have an answer for Will Levis on the ground and in the air for that matter. And that was kind of a recurring theme throughout the game. But the Cards in the second drive were able to get it going a little bit, but faced a 4th and short, and I think it was ended up being an incomplete pass that they threw a flag on and then rescinded the flag, which most people would have thought would have been pass interference, but they took the flag away, and Kentucky went down and scored again, scored a field goal, and Louisville, I think, went 3 and out on the next drive. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that, but the Cards outside of the first drive weren't necessarily able to get anything going in the first half, and at the end it was 31-7 at half, and at that point, anything after that is a moot point, so to speak. So statistically speaking, the Cats 511 yards of total offense, outgaining the Cards by over 100. The Cards had 352. This was kind of an interesting thing. When it comes to rushing, I thought the Louisville defense has been pretty solid all year long in that category, but gave up 362 to the Wildcats, just basically 7.5 yards per attempt. In terms of through the air, Will Levis didn't necessarily have all that much in terms of passing yards, but saw some good consistency. They were just under 80% in terms of completion percentage. So I think the main takeaway on offense is just the fact that, Louisville wasn't really able to get anything going outside of that first drive. And it seemed like there were times where Malik Cunningham under guys. The rushing attack didn't necessarily do all that well. Malik had a performance that, it was probably one of the worst performances of the year for him. And I thought that, he was battling injury at times. He went out of the game a couple plays here and there. But overall for him, 12 for 20, 145 yards, 1 interception, no touchdowns. Rushing the ball, 11 carries for 35 yards and a touchdown. So give Kentucky credit for containing Malik, not really able to get anything going there. Their secondary stepped up big time in a sense that, they were struggling in the passing defensive category, and they were able to, force Malik Cunningham into some tough situations where he had to make throws on the run. And, they got an interception. J.J. Weaver picked off a pass, I believe it was in the second half. But ultimately, just nothing able to get going for Louisville in that aspect. After the game, the post-game press conference, the word execution was brought up many times. Louisville just didn't execute. They felt like they had a good game plan. They felt like they practiced well. But at the end of the day, as tale as old as time, preparation can go as smoothly as it's ever been. But if the execution aspect of it isn't there, then it doesn't necessarily matter. But the defense is kind of where, I draw most of my concerns. I thought that they did some solid things early on in this game. Obviously, the first drive was way too easy. They got down the field extremely quickly. 6 plays, 75 yards, and a touchdown for the Kentucky Wildcats, capped off by a 29-yard touchdown run by Will Levis, which he was virtually untouched. And that was kind of the situation throughout the game, was that Louisville just didn't necessarily have an answer for Levis on the ground, a guy who showed that he's not necessarily a dual threat, but when you give him the lane and opportunity to run, he will make you pay. 14 carries, 113 yards, 4 touchdowns. Chris Rodriguez actually led the Cats in rushing, 16 for 121 and a touchdown. Overall, this was just, I think that Kentucky not necessarily owned. I guess I should say that might be a little, in a misconstrued sense. I thought that they won the line of scrimmage. I thought that their offensive line just did a better job at creating some holes, not only for Levis, but the other guys in the running back committee. And then you had guys like Wandale Robinson who did some good things, Josh Ali, etc. So overall, I felt like Kentucky was executing on all cylinders. They were finding the gaps in the Louisville defense, especially in the passing attack, and just making the Cardinals pay. And we saw in that Mississippi game and then in the Louisville's favor against Syracuse that, some games are out of reach after the first half if they get to a certain extent. And I know that at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily over at that point. Louisville could come back. Actually, I might be mistaken. I don't think it was 31-7 at half. It was 24. I'm sorry, 24-7. That people don't think that might make a big difference, but it does. I mean, that's a 3-possession game. And then Louisville just couldn't get anything going in the second half until it was too late with 2 touchdowns. So ultimately, it felt like, this game, just the momentum hadn't shifted at all, and that Kentucky had all the momentum. Tough loss for the Cards in the season finale. They finished the regular season 6-6. We await to next week or whenever the bowl determinations come out to see where the Cardinals will go. They are postseason eligible, so we are going to talk about that when the time comes. We'll talk some more football as the week goes on. But I want to get to the positive aspect of the show. We'll start with the men's basketball team. 2 very solid wins against Mississippi State and Maryland down in the Bahamas in Thanksgiving week. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about our friends over at Prize Picks. If you are a college sports fanatic, you need to hear about Prize Picks. I love it, and I know you will too. It's daily fantasy made easy. So it offers more college football props than anyone in the world while offering all the star players of the Power 5 as well as mid-majors you might not have ever even heard of. It offers any prop you can think of from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. All of those that deposit and use the promo code LOCKEDON will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So basically you pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And it's literally just you versus the projected numbers. It allows mixed sports entries, so you can take the over on Patrick Mahomes and combine that with the under on Stephen Curry in the same entry. It has an award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It's safe and offers fast withdrawals. So don't hesitate. Go to prizepicks.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON, or go to your App Store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. So let's transition over into the basketball portion of the show. The Cards with 2 solid victories over the past couple days, defeating Mississippi State 72-58 on Thanksgiving evening, and then played a rare morning game, 10 a.m. tip-off in the championship of this little 4-team jamboree against the Maryland Terrapins, who they defeated 63-55. Touching a little bit on the Mississippi State win, I thought that the Cardinals came out and they were playing very, very solid. They had a 41-25 victory in 41-25 advantage at halftime. Sam Williamson came out firing on all cylinders, was really utilizing the mid-range extremely well. For the game, he led the team in scoring, 7 for 12 field goals. He had 15 points to lead the Cards. He was 1 of 3 that scored in double digits. But a little bit to go around for everyone. They shot 31.8% from behind the arc compared to 6.7% for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. That it was 1 for 15 for a team that came in one of the better three-point shooting teams in the country thus far in the early portions of the season. I was proud of the way the team played good defense and attacked the glass, especially in the first half. That basically Louisville with a 16-point first half lead, and then in the second half there were some instances, especially at the end of the game, where play got sloppy, and we'll talk about that in the collective senses, that there are still stretches where this team goes into a little bit of, of a tough stretch, but they end up winning by 14. Ultimately, probably could have been more than that. Looking at the Maryland win, however, this was a game that the Cards had a lead in this one. Now, they were up 40-32 in the second half, and then Maryland went on a big run, and it was just kind of, there were weird vibes all around. Louisville wasn't scoring. I feel like the officiating was questionable at best. But overall, the Cards were able to pull it out. Jared West only had 9 points in the game, but I felt like his performance overall was just what ended up winning the Cardinals the game at the very end, being able to get to where they needed to be. And overall, the Cards shot only 22.2% from behind the arc, while Maryland didn't shoot much better, both under 30%. But the key statistic that most people have kind of pointed out, and rightfully so, the rebounding margin, they out-rebounded Maryland 51-25 in this game, which I think the Louisville basketball Twitter account put out a statistic that said that was the biggest rebounding margin since like the title year in 1986, which is absolutely incredible. When you see, this team had some rebounding issues in the first 4 games against all smaller opponents. And to see what they did, this week, I thought, it was definitely something good to build upon, and that's what you have to focus on moving forward. Is although there is some stuff that needs to be worked on, like there are stretches, offensively where the flow is not good. They'll go, sometimes 4 to 5 minutes without scoring a single point, and I think a lot of that was Mike Pegues trying to find what rotations worked, and there was that one rotation in the second half to where there just wasn't really any scoring virtually. But Chris Mack is back. The return of the Mack. The Cards will travel to Sparty, East Lansing to take on the Michigan State Spartans on Wednesday evening. We'll preview that game as that gets closer. But overall, we talked about trying to find an answer to those scoring woes in certain portions. I still think that there's a little bit too much carelessness with the basketball in terms of being reckless in turnovers, just trying to jump the gun and force the issue on transition opportunities, or just overall, decision making. I feel like Louisville has been somewhat too careless with the basketball this season, albeit it has gotten better. They've been a lot more careful with the first in the last 2 games, I should say. But overall, this week taught me a lot of things. Number one is that this Louisville basketball team is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, there were some people admittedly talking, is this team going to even make the NCAA tournament? And albeit I think that was a little bit of an overreaction. You can never judge a team in November of how good they're going to be, just like you can never judge a team how bad they're going to be in November. But overall, definitely a breath of fresh air what we saw this past weekend, and a lot of hope. They were able to contend with some bigger front courts. Garrison Brooks against Mississippi State. Iverson Molinar for Mississippi State had a good game points-wise, but overall in that first half, I thought that they held him in check, along with Tolu Smith and the guys for Ben Howland's squad and the Bulldogs. The Terrapins, I think that Fats Russell and company made life tough for the Cards in the first half and in the middle stretch of that second half. But I was proud of how the Cards bounced back. There was a part in that game where they went down by 5 points. This was in the stretch where they hadn't scored for a while. I think Maryland was on like a 10 or 13 point run to where they just went out in front where they were up by 5. Noah Locke hit a kind of a tough mid-range, right by the 10, 15 feet out of the outside the basket, and then Matt Cross hit a pull-up 3 to tie the game. The Cards were able to then take the lead and hold on to it. I like the grittiness. One thing that stands out about this team for me is just the effort on both ends of the court. Sometimes they over-gamble. Sometimes defensively they lose their man. They don't attack the glass the way they should. They get beat on the glass. But this week showed that this is going to be, one of those teams, that we saw like from Chris Mack and his Xavier squads, to where they're just a pesky team. Jared West is a very solid defender. They really make you work on the defensive side of things, and I think as the season goes on for the Louisville offense, it's going to keep getting better and better. I think Noah Locke is going to figure out some of his shooting woes, and that's another thing. Noah Locke was essentially, a non-factor in the first half against Mississippi State that saw the Cards go up by 16 points. So that's something to focus on, is the fact that their leading scorer only had 4 points in the first half. But at the end of the day, what happened? I mean, the Cards were able to get scoring from other guys. That is what the team has been needing, is other guys to step up scoring-wise. So I want to, hold off on more basketball talk until we get, closer to the Michigan State matchup, which is just here in a couple of days on Wednesday, a couple sleeps away. We're going to transition over into the volleyball side of things. The number 1 overall seed in all of the land face some adversity in the regular season finale in terms of that week. We'll talk about how they handled that and then do a little preview into their tournament run coming up here just shortly. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about the title sponsor of the show, NetSuite. So imagine this scenario. This is it. The putt to win the tournament. If you sink it, the championship is yours. But on your backswing, your hat falls over your eyes. Is this how you're running your business? Poor visibility because you're still relying on spreadsheets and outdated finance software? To see the full picture, you need to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle. It's the number 1 financial system to power your growth. You can automate your processes and close your books in no time while staying well ahead of the competition. Over 27,000 businesses already use NetSuite, and right now, through the end of the year, NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program to those ready to upgrade at netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA. Head to netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA for special end-of-year financing on the #1 financial system for growing businesses. Once again, that is netsuite.com/LockedOnNCAA. I also want to talk about our friends at Built Bar. If you haven't tried a Built Bar by now, you are missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but for me, protein bars sometimes can be waxy, chalky, or even plain hard to choke down. But it's different with a Built Bar. It's soft. It's covered in 100% real chocolate, and when you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. It's more of an experience, one that you'll enjoy. You'll swear you're eating a candy bar. And one of the big benefits is that it is low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, high in protein. So you get all the healthy benefits on top of just being purely delicious. There are so many mouth-watering flavors. My favorite is salted caramel, but there's double chocolate, there's cherry barcia, there's coconut, there's raspberry. This month, Built is coming out with new limited time flavors every 3 to 4 days, so check their website out often. You don't want to miss out. Go to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your first order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, so the final segment of the show, talking about the Louisville volleyball team finishing the regular season undefeated, the first time in ACC history that a team from the conference has gone undefeated in the regular season. They will look to continue that on their road to glory and the tournament coming up here this upcoming weekend. The tournament pairings have been released for the Louisville Cardinals. As I mentioned, the #1 overall seed. They will start their run at Freedom Hall, where they will host potentially the first, I believe, 4 matchups. I think it's the first 4 matchups. But they start out with the University of Illinois Chicago, the Horizon League champions. If they win that game, they will take on the winner of Ball State and Michigan, the ranked seeds on their side of the bracket. They have number 16 Florida, who they could have a Sweet 16 matchup with, and then number 8 Georgia Tech, who the Cards have swept both times this season, along with number 9 Ohio State on that little portion of the bracket up in the top left-hand corner of it. But this past week, the team faced some adversity. Obviously, everyone knows about the road trip up to Pittsburgh, where they defeated the number 3 ranked Panthers 3-1 in that thriller. They opened up the match with 2 25-19 set victories. The third set got out of hand. The Cards dropped that one. I think they Pittsburgh went on a big run to finish out that set. But the fourth set, they trailed 10-4. And then crawled all the way back to come out victorious on the road. And then on Friday in the regular season finale, senior day at L&M Federal Credit Union Arena, the team dropped the opening set to the Notre Dame Irish, who they had swept up in South Bend just the week prior. But overall, I think that this was a performance to where, the Cards kind of, and volleyball is such a weird momentum sport that where, sometimes, a team wins a set and then they get absolutely dominated the next 3. That wasn't the case. Louisville won the second set pretty easily. The third set, however, is where things got interesting. Notre Dame had I think it was 20-17 or something along those lines, where they had at least a 3-point lead in that third set very late in it. And the Cards came back, ripped off a big run, ended up taking the third set. The rest was history. They finished the season, I believe, was 28-0. But overall, a very solid performance, and I'm very, just overall blown away by the handling of adversity with this team. They never get too high. They never get too low. There's so many different ways that they can get to. They do so many great things on the volleyball court in all aspects of it. The presence at the net, the defense in terms of serve receptions and digs, and the nuclear passing attack is very solid. Just overall impressed with what they've been doing, and their tournament run begins Friday. We'll talk about that as this season as the week it gets closer and closer, as that game gets closer. Before we get out of here, we talked about the football loss, talked about the good basketball wins, and what the volleyball program is doing. Some great work from Danny Busman Kelly and that crew, and in the volleyball program. Louisville, this is the best team in program history, in my opinion. I think the record speaks for itself. They have multiple wins over Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech, who are both top 8 teams. They have other wins over teams over national seeds. Kentucky, who's, I believe, number 7, Purdue, Nebraska, etc. The list goes on. What they're doing is incredible. We'll preview some of those matchups as the games get closer. Hosting the University of Illinois Chicago on Friday evening, 7 o'clock, first serve scheduled at Freedom Hall. Before we get out of here, a couple quick shout-outs first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast, the most recent episode released on Sunday evening. Check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can follow that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. But that's going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.